90% of the time, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It's not. It
Gets the people going.
You're now listening to Diagnonsense.
Look at all this damage!
With Justin Pendergrass and Kurt Honak.
You are a sad, strange little man.
Then we would just be idiots saying nonsense.
I don't know that I would take any of my advice from Cartman from South Park. I don't know that he really is
advocate for anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure he advocates about a lot of things, but I don't know that I really want to follow his lead
on anything.
You know, even if it's like a good thing, I might actually be on the other side just because it's Cartman.
Just because of bias.
Yeah. I'm just like, you know what? Can't.
He's got bars, though.
He does have bars.
That's pretty good
I'm
flow.
actually kind of jealous about that song's probably more popular than any other song that I've ever released. So
tragic.
Yeah, it's probably got more views than anything I've ever done.
Tragedy.
Good for South Park, you know.
They're killing it.
Yeah, so
killing the game.
Thank you guys for tuning in to Diagnonsense. I'm your host, Justin Pendergrass. I'm here with Kurt Honak. How you doing, Kurt?
Doing great.
Yeah, man. I'm going to throw it over to Isaac for some quick housekeeping, and then we're going to dive in.
I am also here. And you're not just with Kurt.
I don't want to introduce you ever.
That's fine. What else do we have going on? This Friday, we have, let's see. So you have 2 days to prepare for it, I guess. But we are doing a screening of The Hunting Grounds in the cafe. That's free for everyone. The food is not free, but you should come get food as well. There's a bunch of new menu items in there now. Big Mike sandwich, the baked potatoes, like we've been saying, so that's really awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Man, kind of just getting ready for the month of April, honestly. I'm blanking on anything else that we're doing in March. Other than the fact that the cafe and the boutique are both open on Saturday, which has been going pretty well. So if you weren't able to make it before, come in on a Saturday. I think it's like 10 to 3, 10 to 4 that they're open. So
yeah, it's a part-time hours or something.
Yeah, and that's nice. I know there's a lot of people that haven't been able to make it out yet, so that's good. And on the podcast side of things, man, we're just going. So this Friday, also the 3rd episode of Redemption. I don't know why I got really Irish. I got really Irish there. The episode.
The 3rd
of Redemption.
episode.
3rd episode of Redemption's dropping, and My Voice episode 2 is out. My House podcast episode 3 is out. So yeah,
definitely
as always,
check that one out. That one's fire.
Lots of content. Man, what are you guys talking about today? Because I'm super excited. Because we're talking about government legislation, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go.
Really just diving right into the good stuff. But me and Kurt were actually having a discussion this weekend that we wanted to kind of follow up on and continue. There's some stuff that we've been dealing with here locally, you know, across the state with this fentanyl stuff really just spiking around the state and becoming a huge issue. You know, we're losing people left and right. How many? 17 overdoses is what it said?
I think so. Last time I checked, it was somewhere around there. And I think that's just for the valley, yeah? Or
yeah, something like that. See, and I don't know that...
I'm trying to keep track of it, too, because I'm connected with the Matsard Opioid Task Force, and we're doing, I teach Narcan, and I am trying to keep tabs because I believe they're going to go up on the Narcan dosage in the kits that they distribute. So when I'm doing trainings with people, I'm instead of handing out, like one kit with like 2 4 milligram sprays, I might hand out like 16 total. So that's like 2 kits. So 4 Narcans total. So
wow.
Yeah. So
how many did they say that it's taking to just revive people when they're having those overdoses?
Well,
just from the fentanyl, right? Like, because it's being laced into other drugs around the valley,
right?
You know, between marijuana,
right,
heroin,
and so the deal with the fentanyl is that it can take more Narcan because I believe how that works is the mechanism of action is stronger on the fentanyl than it is on like a regular opioid, so it can take more to revive somebody. And so the kits, I think at some point, it sounds like Project Hope might be distributing higher milligrams of Narcan in their kits.
Yeah. Do you know, you said that you distribute Narcan and you do those trainings. How can they get a hold of you if they want to get into that stuff, Kurt? So
Just call our building here at 373-4357 and just let me know, and I'll try to squeeze you in. Or I'm pretty flexible. If people need to get trained on it, I can do a one-on-one and teach you within an hour and equip you. So
I mean,
so that's a pretty quick thing.
You trained me, and I was talking the whole time, and it still only took 20 minutes. So
yeah, I blazed that one. I had my coffee in that morning. I had
you were a little extra
Wheaties.
juiced for that one. Okay.
no, but in just like
Right.
20 minutes, I really felt like it was beneficial.
You felt like confident You'd be confident administering.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and understanding the overdose. And they have a really useful PowerPoint that they gave me to use.
I think and something I want to highlight too is even though when you're reviving people from fentanyl, you're going to need those higher doses. The thing that really shocked me, that's great that you told me, is you can't overdose on Narcan. So
yeah, they consider it safe. So
Right.
like
I mean,
that's the thing is like
you can use 3 of those kits and it's not going to do any, there's no negative side effects that they have found.
well, and you kind of want to use it as needed, right? And really the training is elaborates that a little bit better. But it's not no risk for abuse, and then it's not dangerous if kids accidentally get into it, which is whatever happens, if it's administered and it's not an overdose. So that's that's makes it really kind of a miracle revival thing, drug, because it's like, you can store it in a place where you don't necessarily have to have the security level that you would have to have for another kind of substance, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I try to keep a couple on me at all times. I usually have like a little go bag in my car, but I've heard that it's actually not good to leave them in my vehicle.
I think it's mostly the heat element for it,
Back and forth between cold and hot.
Yeah, but then if you freeze it, it's a plunger delivery, which is actually a really simple delivery mechanism. So it's not intravenous or anything like that. It's not like we're teaching people how to be nurses to deliver it.
Yeah, it just goes into your nose and you squirt it, right?
Yeah, mucous membranes, and then it's not you don't have to have a functioning respiratory system to deliver it, right? Because that's the whole thing with an opioid overdose, is you have that suppression of the respiratory system. So I mean, it's a really a miracle thing to have. And there's so many people on opioid substances that, I know people that maybe they're stabilized and they're not like actively seeking out, they're not getting deferred drugs or using illicitly, but just trying to stabilize out. But having one of those is super useful because, you just don't know. You don't know where somebody's at in their recovery. You don't know, if you always have the whole story. So it's nice to have just in case. And another thing is that, I was hearing that the fentanyl is ending up in counterfeit drugs too that aren't necessarily opioids, right? So my mentality, right, with that is like, if I'm training a kid on how to use that, and they're potentially going to use that for themselves or another person, is that, hey, even if they're not planning on using opioids, they have a response to an opioid overdose because there's so much fentanyl out there. And it's really, the best policy is abstinence, right? Is staying away from drugs. But we deal with people in active addiction, and that's not always on their radar.
Not always the first. The first contact isn't always us already saying that, right?
Right.
And that kind of falls under the schools a lot of the times, to be able to administer that information about like drugs and things like that, because that's where they get the mass majority of the population of those young people who are really coming up against these newer drugs and these things that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Right. So just continuing that conversation about the fentanyl stuff. I mean, I see it becoming something that's even bigger within mental health, because I know those people who are looking for that self-medication and those things that are happening with their mental health, and then they pick up the wrong thing.
Right.
Right. So what do you think, Kurt, about that? Like, as we're moving forward we're in a mental health crisis, we're coming out of a COVID crisis, we're now in this fentanyl crisis. It's just continuing. It's like we don't have any breathing room, and the young people in our population are really they have these weights on them that, I mean, I didn't even experience as a young person. You know, I was dealing with a lot of mental health stuff, but I didn't have to worry about, like, you know, if I took a hit of weed, that I was going to get hit with fentanyl or something that was laced in there that was an immediate danger to myself. When I was just looking for something to help me cope.
Right. I mean, I just want to say, like, my view of that, like, just right off the top of what I'm thinking is just like, I don't know, I was reading a comment that John Green had left on I think a Facebook post. You know, his daughter was detoxing in an Anchorage jail, and there was passed away. His tragic story. And he just said that it's a different era, and that's part of what I see. Part of what I see is, like, I see not just that, like, people, a few things have changed here and there. I see that there's, like, large cultural shifts happening. And
correct,
and when we, like, just in our generation, right? In our generation, it was like, well, I mean, I want to think, so all the way back into, like, let's go back a few decades, right? Like, I think right around, maybe like the 60s or 70s, you started to have people kind of started to experiment more and more with psychoactive substances, and you had more and more pharmaceuticals available and more stuff available, and everybody was kind of trying different things.
Right. It was like a turn of the age thing. Like, here, this will fix it. And I mean, I've seen some of the old advertisements for those, and they are ridiculous. Once we get some video stuff going in here, we'll definitely have to pull that stuff up.
Yeah.
Well, you
and
know why
discuss
everyone
those advertisements.
You know why everyone started experimenting with psychoactive drugs is it ties back to MK Ultra. The government was giving people LSD.
I mean, that was
to
a thing.
Experiment on their brain. This is not.
No, that's true.
I don't even want to get it. I just did this whole deep dive on MK Ultra.
Yeah, no, that was a real thing.
It is actual proof that the government was just handing out LSD to people,
bro,
just to see, like.
It's not the first time it's happened. World War II.
Yeah, like, what'll happen? Like, I don't know.
They're like, hey, we got this cool thing. It's called meth.
Well, and, like, these
let me just stay up all night so you can keep going.
These experiments, like, directly lead to the Manson family, the Unabomber, like, all this crazy stuff.
Hold up.
Just because the government.
They're going to hear this.
They're going to hear this. It's too late for me. You guys can still save yourself. Still save yourselves. I'm in too deep, though.
I know. We have dozen of listeners right now.
Yeah.
Like
dozens.
Don't
one dozen of listeners.
Don't tell on us.
Well, and they didn't really know, right? I think it was something like, if you're talking about, like, that scale, right? It was something like an arms race for mind control between the Soviet Union and the United States.
Right. Well, it was
like,
perceived as an arms race. The U.S. perceived it as an arms race, and then it kind of came out in the 70s that, like, the Chinese and the Soviets weren't really experimenting with any of that stuff, and they were like, man, we've done a lot of morally dubious things for the last 2 decades, and turns out we didn't really need to do that. So
let's just dust that under the rug and not worry about it, right?
Sweep that away. Whoopsie. Whoopsie. Sorry, we destroyed, like, thousands of people's brains trying to take away their entire personality and reprogram them as Manchurian candidates. Whoops.
I did read, I don't remember if it was in Whitaker's work, I did read that the Soviets did experiment with antipsychotics, or they at least used them as part of their, I don't know, what would you say? I mean, they did all kinds of things to people, but
the Soviets have definitely done some.
Right. I mean, but I guess my point with with whether, where this starts is, like, so we went through that era, right, where everybody's kind of experimenting, but as the pharmacological era kind of developed, it's like, so we had, everybody was experimenting, but then we had drugs with the mechanism of action that we had a huge shift from like, just like, what would you say, drugs that are like naturally, like,
Naturally
plant based.
developed,
Yeah.
like peyote.
Well, and I'm not saying those are harmless or those are those are like safe or anything. I'm just saying that what I'm saying, I guess, is that we went from having those organic, like naturally available drugs in our environment that we had arguably evolved alongside since the dawn of our species to now we're creating things in a lab that are created scientifically to bypass the body's natural mechanism for dealing with the toxicity of the substance. And then we get into this era, right, where, now it's just like it's ramped up to like where it's like, yeah, you can't just go and try and experiment with a drug. Like you could get something that could literally kill you, like right on your first try because the mechanism of actions have been so refined in these drugs for like decades. They've been working towards pharmacologically developing these things, and it's like fentanyl is a example of that, right? And
Correct,
and
yeah.
and it's sort of like the culture has become like from not understanding it, addiction or substance dependency, to sort of like starting to accept it and then now it's like kind of normalized. But on the other end of that spectrum, now it's like, well, when do we draw the lines? To me, from my perspective, it's like, well, where do we draw the lines on like
Right.
where
When do we stop messing with science?
I mean, or
the body.
Yeah, all
Sure.
all kinds of things, right?
I think that just it's just a testament to the importance of educating our young people on the opiates and the drugs that are really out there. I believe that they're pushing for that in schools currently with Michael Carson and John Green. You mentioned him earlier.
Right.
Trying to get something in there that puts it as a requirement in schools for kids to learn about the drugs in their community so that they can understand really the cause and effects of what these things really do to your life and your body, and the real actual problem behind that, and the ability that it's forming to lose people so quickly. And now those dangerous drugs are becoming more dangerous as they're being laced with this fentanyl. I think it's just an important conversation to have, especially when you have that captive audience in the school with those young people.
Right.
Which kind of, spirals us into this next conversation, really, Kurt. We're looking at House Bill 60 and Senate Bill 80, I believe.
Wait, can you say that with some pizzazz? Come on. Get
Oh,
me excited.
my
Get me
gosh.
excited.
Yeah, guys, today we're going to talk about House Bill 60 and Senate Bill. Woo! And Senate Bill 80 is also on the agenda. Let's go.
Wow. Thank you, Isaac.
Super excited. Thank you so much for that, Isaac. It actually makes me more excited for this conversation.
Yeah.
So
Get ready. Hold on to your seats, everyone.
for those who don't know, guys, these bills would push a mental health education curriculum into schools, but they'd be designed and created from the State Board of Education and Early Development, the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development, and they would set the guidelines and really design what that could look like in their community, because it's different for every community on what they believe they need. Get some parents involved, hopefully. I don't know that that's even a mention in here. Let's see. North Star Behavioral Health, the National Council for Behavioral Health, Providence Health and Service Alaska, South Central Foundation, Anchorage Community and Mental Health Services, North Star Behavioral Health, and the National Council, educators, students, administrators, and other mental health organizations in order to form effective guidelines for school boards, teachers, and students. So what we're talking about is really what this could do, impact, and hinder. I think that there's a lot of conversation that you and I could have around this, Kurt. We've had this conversation a couple times, and I think that you and I are pretty evenly just neutral on what we think this bill could really do. But let's talk about that. We'll play devil's advocate a little bit and and just move forward. So overall, this bill is supposed to create a curriculum-based approach to teaching young people about mental health and the standards, and so that they can understand their mental health better. From what I'm understanding, just reading this, there's a lot of gaps in this. There's not. It doesn't really have like a huge approach. It would just say that if they want to do this, they can.
Just from what I read, just like looking at this, the first thought that came to my head was that, okay, so we want to teach mental health in schools. What does that look like? In here, they have a line about, on the HB 60, we've got let me see here. This is a sponsor statement, I believe. Representative Matt Clayman. Sorry if I'm saying your last name wrong.
Yeah, that's who's. I think he's the primary push.
Yeah. And it says, so good health practices such as diet, exercise, and personal hygiene, and bad health habits such as substance abuse, alcoholism, and patterns of physical abuse.
Yeah, so it's saying basically in the health classes today, we're seeing it includes diet, exercise, personal hygiene, bad health habits such as substance abuse, alcoholism, and patterns of physical abuse.
Oh.
But it does not address mental health in those guidelines.
So it does not address mental health and guidelines. And I'm just like, so I guess when I first went over this, I'm like, well, those are all good things, right? We do want to address all those things that are already in there, right? But when I went over it and saw mental health, so I'm going like, okay, so what does that look like? Because that varies from culture to religion to belief about sciences. I mean, that to me is such a broad
valid.
Thing. And another thing is that, it looks like in the Western world, like if you're reading Thomas Oz or Robert Whitaker, it looks like in the Western world, we kind of have a DSM centric approach. And what I mean by that is like, we use the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health as sort of like that's our foundation for all of our approaches towards mental health. And so like when I first read this, my mindset was like, okay, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about teaching about schizophrenia, bipolar, borderline personality disorder in elementary school, or what is it? Is it elementary or high school? I guess it's.
I think that this would put it in health classes. So
health classes.
You don't start health until I think the
Freshman,
7th grade.
Well,
I had a little bit of health,
and then you have that half a year of health in your freshman year. It's like one health and then civics.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's how it was when I was in high school.
Well, and I think my concern really with this is that are they going to have the time, right? They have all these things that they got to touch on. They have half a semester to go over all of these things, making sure that we learn about our bones and our body and the being, like
half a year. They have half a year because you're in the same classes for high school the whole way through, aren't you?
But you only need half a credit for health.
Right. So you're there for two quarters for one full semester, not half a semester.
So is that 4 months?
Yeah, basically. It's still not a lot of time.
It's not. It's like,
but just to be accurate, it seems like it comes from a good place, which makes it difficult to talk about.
Right.
Like obviously it comes from a place of trying to better educate our youth.
Yeah. I mean,
so that they can,
which is good.
Right. But
but how do we do that?
Well, and it's kind of obviously it's not a direct correlation, but it kind of goes back to like, do we teach sex in high school?
Or is that the parent's responsibility?
Because it probably should be the parent's responsibility, but not every kid has a parent to teach them about it.
Right. And so then I'll argue on the side of I didn't have a parent to teach me about my mental health. My parents were learning their own struggles and going through their own mental health stuff and didn't fully understand it.
Right.
If we bring ACEs into account, my mom and dad both have 8 on the ACEs scale, and I have a 9.
And so can you? I have a brief understanding of what ACEs
I'll give
is, but
for
everyone, can you break that down really quick?
Yeah, so ACEs is adverse childhood experiences. It's the experiences that we have from the day we are born all the way up until we're 18. That's how they map it and they measure it, and it's 10 questions about, Did you have an adult hurt you? Did you have an adult touch you? Did you have somebody push you, slap you, grab you? Like, you know, it talks about these things that happen in your life that could have made up like some trauma, right? And when you break that down, you know, I have a 9. So that means there's one thing on there that I hadn't experienced, which is a family member going to jail. Okay? So other than that, I experienced the vast majority of those things and those feelings, and I'm working through those things as I grow, but not everybody understood those, and I didn't even know what it was when I was a young man.
So then does it come to the same thing as sex education, where do you give parents the option to let their kids opt out of something like that so that they can have that conversation at home?
Well, I think that we do have that option already. I think that parents are sitting home with a permission slip saying, hey, can we bring your kid into this classroom? I think that conversation starts happening in the 4th grade, 3rd, 4th grade, right before that transition starts to happen for young people. But, you know, that being said, you know, I don't know that mental health should be something that should be opted out of. I think that kids should understand their mental health and be given an opportunity to understand that.
Right.
But when I'm talking about mental health, I'm not talking about medicated mental health. I'm talking about the full understanding of what the symptoms are of somebody who needs to go probably see a counselor.
Right. Yeah. And so that's right. And I totally agree with that. Right. I'm not saying that because I don't really recognize the DSM I don't even a legitimate document. That doesn't mean can I say that? Can I just say that? I don't recognize it as a legitimate document. That doesn't mean that I don't believe the symptomology is real. Right. So people are having symptoms. I don't think the way that we diagnose it in the Western world and treat it is the correct way to do it. But that doesn't mean that people aren't having symptoms, and that doesn't mean that people don't need to have conversations about mental health. Right. So,
yeah. So, well, and I would agree with you that, you know, should people opt out of that? No. But should the government be telling people what they have to do? In some cases, yes. Is this one of those cases?
It's a gray area, right?
It's a gray area.
It becomes something where it's like, okay, our job is to educate the younger generation on the things that are coming. And let's be realistic. COVID isolated people for 2 years, and we have yet to see the ripple effect of what that's going to do.
Right.
There is increased isolation. There was disconnect. There was, you know, some of these kids were stuck at home with that abuse, and their ACEs are probably up.
Yeah.
Right. They probably have more things going on with them that they don't fully understand.
Right.
I was afraid to talk about my stuff because I was afraid I would be removed from my home.
Right.
Right. Because to me, that was normal. Right? I didn't understand that I was being put into a situation that was wrong, right? Oh, we got to open up the oven to heat the living room? All right.
Hey,
that makes
don't
sense.
turn your nose down at oven heat.
Yeah.
Little oven heat never killed anyone.
Never killed anybody.
You already had it on.
I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My family had a wood stove. We used oven heat all the time. Like, so it's just the way it is.
I think it's a little different, but we'll continue moving forward. No, but I mean, I didn't fully understand that stuff, and I didn't even know how to ask, right? Because I was afraid to ask, first of all, because I was afraid what would happen if I asked.
Yeah.
But I was also afraid because I didn't fully understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling, and all I knew was what I'd seen on TV when people would talk about their stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, they put them in a straitjacket and put them in the hospital, and they shove meds down their throat, and they just force them to do all these things. I'm like, man, no thanks.
Right.
I think that
I didn't want to end up like the guy from Sling Blade.
It's great. I think it's great that we are trying to implement something like that, but I also think that, like you kind of said, there is a lot of gaps in here.
Well,
yeah,
and that's why I'm trying to play devil's advocate, which I think is what we should have just called this show. The amount of times that we're referencing,
right? It really is, and you know, Kurt and I are on the same page. I think I'm more for. I think he's a little bit more for against, but I'm more for because I didn't have the opportunity to know, and Kurt was given the opportunity to know.
Right.
And we're kind of in this moral gray area where it's like, yes, this information needs to be given, but who's responsible for giving it?
Right.
Right. Now, parents don't know, like you hear it time and time again. I didn't know my son was suicidal. I didn't know that he was feeling that way. So why would it be the parents' responsibility to identify those things when they don't even know what they're looking for? Right. they don't even know what's going on with themselves half the time, right? Like they don't even know the full feeling of emotions that they're up against, those heavy emotions that they're up against. And then they instantly just revert to the system that is broken, a broken system that has continuously been broken.
Right.
And they just buy into it because they don't understand what's actually going on. And it's the only answer, right, Kurt? Like,
well, I mean,
they're thinking is there.
I guess that's what I'm afraid of, right? Because, like, yes, I don't know. The devil you know sometimes is better than the devil you don't know. Like, when we talk about this like the way that it's been approached in schools, it's like, okay, talk to a school counselor, get connected with mental health. The way that it's been done before, where it's like, well, that was a DSM-centric approach. Like, how many of these kids got diagnosed with ADD, ADHD? And then I'm seeing articles that come out that say, oh, by the way, we don't know. It looks like in this approach, these guys don't know whether because kids with high ACEs scores and kids with ADHD present the same. We don't know if they have what they define as the pathology of ADHD, or they have.
How young are they when they're diagnosing them with ADHD?
Right.
I'm a man, right? I'm going to just say that. I am a young man, and I was told that I had ADHD.
Yeah.
As a young man.
Right.
Actually, what I had was extreme trauma.
Right.
That caused me not to be able to connect with things, and I couldn't think right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The back of my head was beating down on these things.
Yeah.
So I don't know that you can even diagnose a young person.
Right.
I wouldn't say that you should even start having that conversation about ADHD until they're into their teen years.
Right.
If you want to talk about ADHD.
Well, and we push this, how long have we been talking about mental health as a chemical imbalance too? And I'm sure there's plenty of school counselors that have pushed that narrative where it's like, yes, people have mental illnesses, they're chemical imbalances. And it's like, well,
but are you eating enough?
Right. Yeah. But how do you know that unless you're pulling the cerebral spinal fluid out of somebody? How do you know that there's a chemical imbalance correlation? Like, I mean,
you
like
are chemically unbalanced. I can tell just by looking at you.
That's why I'm challenged about, like, okay, so say theoretically they set up this class, right? And they're in there and they're like, okay, here's what the DSM-5, here's a little snippet of what the DSM-5 says about, Jimmy, he's got bipolar disorder. And it's like, I don't believe the way that's defined, is an accurate, objective portrayal of what, that would look like. Because if we're talking about like ADD, ADHD, and they're saying, okay, it's a chemical imbalance where they're not getting enough of this neurotransmitter, or that's the treatment protocol, then, it's like based on what, based on what diagnostics are you using to find that out? And the second thing is that even objectively based in science? Like, I just don't see it as like a legitimate, to me, it's like a hijacking of the culture. It's like, instead of helping people who genuinely need help and have symptoms, right? Instead of helping those people, they're learning to do it the wrong way, and they're going to have to relearn how to do it. But like you said, not everybody even has access to basic education. So it really
not even
depends.
The full understanding of what's going on.
Right.
So, I do think that this has good intentions. I actually spoke to the House and the Senate about this, and I advocated for.
Yeah.
But I was very clear. I said, if you don't have people with lived experience at that table having this conversation, then you're actually doing an injustice to these students.
Right.
So it also comes down to the fact that some of these people on this list, I'm not going to name who, should not be on this list. All I hear is negative things about some of these places, just here in the state of Alaska, that are really just actually causing more harm than good. I have never seen somebody come out of one of these organizations, not all of them, but a specific one of these organizations, who told me that they had a great experience and they felt better when they left.
Right. And these are the organizations that would be implementing
the program. So that's another red flag for me. And again, me and Kurt, we're guys with lived experience. We want to hear what everybody else has to say. What are your thoughts on this? Because this is this is a good conversation to have. What do you want to see for mental health in the schools? What do you think that they should be talking about? Do you think that they should be talking about this?
Right.
And
Well,
I want to throw it back to the listeners and just really have that conversation.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys could talk about this for 2 hours.
Ad
I
nauseam.
know,
Yeah.
but,
Right.
But I want to hear what our community has to
I know.
say.
I know
because-
everyone driving right now is just gripping the steering wheel so tight they're hanging on every word, listening to us talk about legislation. But so here, maybe as we kind of wind things down, because we are up against the clock a little bit, where would you guys recommend that people go to find out more information about this bill, and then maybe action that people could take to enact some change or weigh in on this?
Yeah, so it's the Alaska State Legislature that you'd have to just type that into, I believe Google is what I did today, and then Representative Matt Claman. I don't know how to say your last name, man. If you're listening, I'm sorry. I hope you're listening.
Come on the podcast, tell us.
Come on the podcast, tell us how to say your name.
And talk about the bill, honestly.
Yeah,
We could do that.
I mean, we will probably have this conversation again as it starts moving through things. I know that the House was a little bit, they had some pushback, and it was rightfully so. There are some things that are concerning just as young people or as a community with this conversation around mental health, but I do believe that it needs to be a conversation. So we're going to wrap things up. Kurt, do you have anything else to say for us?
My final thoughts are just that it should always be a choice. I think that, when we're talking about people deciding what's best for their kids or deciding, what's best for their future, their own future, I think that there should be a lot of choice involved. I think that's probably my final thoughts on that.
Yeah, that is definitely fair. Thank you guys for tuning into Diagnonsense. I'm your host, Justin Pendergrass, here with my co-host, Kurt Honak. And thank you guys again. We will hear from you next week.
All right. Thanks, y'all.